So this is part 2 of my video on learning to read, and I just want to encourage people whose child is in grade 2 or 1 or 3 and they can't read yet, and you're worried about them. I want to tell you what the strategies are, like just normal strategies. And again, I'm not talking about kids with dyslexia. There are specific things that you can do to help kids to learn to read if they have a learning disorder. I'm talking about the right brain kids that have a hard time learning to read because they think in pictures instead of words. And so what you want to do, instead of forcing them to read, this is what happens when someone's forced to learn to read when it's a little bit too early for them. When they're forced to learn to read when it's too early and their brains aren't ready, they develop a resistance to it because it makes them feel stupid and shamed. And so if they cannot do it yet, and they're being forced to try, all they're doing is reinforcing the belief that they cannot do it. And so they develop this resistance inside of themselves, and they develop a shame along with reading. And so they never want to do it. And so it's really important, I think, not to do that. What it is important to do is have a literacy-rich environment. And by that, I mean they should see adults in their house reading. They should see people reading. They should have literature that's available to them so that they eventually, when they're able to, you'll see them pick up a book. And you see little tiny kids doing this. They copy us, right? They copy us and they sit there and they make up a story and they follow along, pretend with their finger, but they can't read it, so they're just pretending. That's actually pre-reading behavior. That is something that's a good sign that they're interested in reading. Just let that happen. It doesn't have to be right. You don't tell them that's wrong, that's not how to read. It is how to read, actually. They just can't interpret it yet. So what happened with my son is that he found a book at the bookstore he wanted to learn. He wanted to read because he didn't realize what books were for. He was like, you can learn that from a book in a bookstore? I'm like, well, that's what books are for. He's like, well, that's it. I need to learn to read. And 3 months later, he was reading at grade level. So their brains have to be ready. They have to be interested, and they have to be, and honestly, it's like magic. All of a sudden, they've taught themselves how to read, and you're like, what? Like, they spent years before that trying to get them to learn to read, and then they just taught themselves. That's how it works. And John Holt talks about this in his book, and so does John Taylor Gatto, is that if you allow someone to do something that they want to do, they'll learn it really quickly, and it's true. So I want to encourage you, if you are a parent with a child that's a little bit young and can't read yet, just wait. Just let them decide that they want to learn, and they will.